It's not that easy to find the right words, to compose a song were it not for the pain and sorrow for beloved friends and souls. But no matter what, dear mother, friends cannot replace my family. Where are my sisters and where are my brothers? But Sekinat will tell you about me after reading my letters. And when I write to you, my darling, it's like I'm looking into your eyes. You stand before me, my mother. I'm afraid of dying. I will be honest, but once I pick up the weapon, I'll fight against the enemy, so you will not be ashamed of me. From the bottom of my heart, you will see Salam everywhere, where I used to be happy and where I grew up, the Caucasus Mountains.
Она поет песню, которую сложил ее брат.
She sings a song that her brother composed. Askerby wrote to them from the front. He explained to them how he fights, how he misses them, how he will come back to his loved ones in Karachay after the victory. The song describes what he was feeling and thinking during the war.
I'm helpless. Let the war be over soon, so I can go back to my homeland.
Марзи поет ее уже 77 лет.
Marzi has been singing this song for 77 years, every day, so that she does not forget, so that from now on, her grandchildren would remember it too. Askerby was not destined to return, neither to Karachay nor to his loved ones. He lost his life on the front line, and by that time his loved ones were all gone as well. The house was gone. He was stripped of his homeland as well as the rest of the Karachay people. Karachay and its people were sentenced to oblivion.
Токарного станка Мухаммад Хаджи Ачабаев больше 70 лет.
Muhammad Hagi Achabayev has worked the turning lathe for more than 75 years. He has learned to operate it since he was a boy. In order to provide for his family, 2 sisters, his father, and mother. Thanks to the turning lathe, his family did not die of hunger, as many other Karachay families did when they were deported from North Caucasus to Middle Asia. Back then, Muhammad Hage was a little older than his granddaughter is now. He still has a solid memory and he remembers many things, which he would like to forget. But this is the story of his family and his people, the story which his descendants must know.
If somebody died on the road, their bodies were simply taken outside and left there, with no opportunity to be buried. Everyone who died was left on the road, and what happened to them afterwards is unknown. We were traveling for 18 days until we reached Kazakhstan. The situation there was just as difficult. People suffered from hunger. Their state was not better than ours. They did not have any food.
This was just the beginning of the battle for the survival of people who were stripped of their homeland, the 14-year-long battle. Karachay-Cherkasy Autonomous Oblast was created on January 12, 1922. By April 26, 1926, the region was split into Karachay Autonomous Oblast, Nakoyan Shahar as its capital, and Cherkasy National District. The foundation stone of the new city was laid in 1926 near the modern city hospital. As a matter of fact, during the Soviet rule, Karachay got the impulse for all-around development. Hospitals were built, schools and technical colleges were opened, and factories began working. Regional newspaper Red Karachay began printing. Documentary films were made about the autonomous region. They described to the Soviet country about how good Karachay people lived in the Soviet Union. These archive footage shows how life of the region runs high. Plenty of events. People are competent and satisfied as they're building a new and happy life. Here is an exclusive edition of the regional newspaper Red Karachay, October 31st, 1943, 2 days until Karachay's doomsday.
Мы можем вот по заголовкам убедиться в том, что
The headlines clearly show that the region is at peace.
все достаточно мирно, спокойно.
You see the collective farm is finishing the cleanup.
Верхние моры заканчивает уборку. Праздничные подарки.
Holiday presents for frontline officers. The first page reads messages from the Soviet Information Bureau about the victories of the Red Army.
Moreover, here's an announcement about additional recruitment, including the Karachays, to attend pedagogic and teaching institute classes. Turns out, no one in the region knew what was going to happen on November 2nd. In contrast to the capital, which invented and planned the operation, while prosperously receiving reports about harvesting, about the region's planned completion. Moscow offered the Karachay region new quotas for students because there was a lack of teachers. In the meantime, the region was preparing to celebrate the 26th anniversary of the October Revolution, together with the rest of the country. There was no special title for the operation. It was just the first one in the row of deportations of full-grown communities. In Karachay, Stalin was sharpening his skills of relocating tens of thousands of people from their historical homeland to deserted areas of the Middle East and Kazakhstan. It was so-called Karachay test probe, or Stalin's Sith stone of ethnic repressions. As practice showed, such methods never failed.
By the order of the Presidium of the Supreme Council of the USSR, the Karachay people are subject to deportation. Mostly the forces of NKVD were brought in. Since autumn 1943, they have been staying in the Karachay region, about 2 divisions, which stayed in the mountain areas.
Когда они были размещены на территории области, возникли вопросы населения местного, органов власти. Говорилось о том, что
when they were located, questions arose from the local community as well as from authorities. They said that they came for a holiday, to fight enemies of the Soviet rule. Locals treated them kindly and fed them. Nobody suspected anything.
Такого подозрения, что именно для подобной операции они прибыли, у населения не было.
The gathering of the people to go to the train station began in the morning. The operation was conducted in the whole region simultaneously. The surprise factor was important, so that people could not run, so that they could not hide.
I'm the oldest child in the family. My mother was young, 30 years old. The dog barking in the yard woke us up. My father was not at home. It was just my mother and 4 children. I was the oldest one. My mother anxiously jumped out of bed. She barely got to the window when someone knocked at the door, strongly and with a lot of force. The soldiers were on our doorstep.
Confused people rush about the house. They only have half an hour to pack their belongings and what to take, how to get the children ready. And every household has quite a few of them. Panic. All this was happening while staring down the barrel of a gun.
You have 10 minutes. You're being deported. Get dressed quickly. There's a car. How many of you are there? It was 8 of us. My father, my mother, 3 brothers, and 3 sisters. Whatever each of us managed to put on, we did. Then we were thrown into the car. Our house remained unlocked, the animals stayed in the barn, our dog was chained up, the cows were mooing as we left. I was 12 years old when it happened. My youngest brother was only 3 months old.
It was some sort of roulette. Sometimes life itself was at stake. After all, a family's future depended on those few minutes of packing. Could they survive there? Where were they being sent? However, it took a lot of time for people to understand it.
The officer said that we had a right to butcher one sheep and take it on the road with us. But by then I was a strong boy. I was in the 6th grade. I went to the barn, butchered a goat, and quickly carved the carcass. Soldiers were walking behind the officer. One of them was giving me clues. He told me to butcher a bird and take it on the road. I did what he said and butchered 17 turkeys.
However, that happened later, after Muhammad Haq showed the officer photos of 5 of his brothers who went through the war. But before that, his family was given half an hour to pack. For someone, a bucket of honey, a bag of corn, millet, or lentil was rescue. Also, dried or quickly cooked meat. The main thing was to have time to grab it. Even a sewing machine could save a life, help people survive.
My mother had a sewing machine which sewed well. She sewed for anyone who asked. This was what she did.
They were being deported, as if they were enemies of the people, as if they betrayed the Soviet homeland during the years of war. This is exactly what soldiers and officers knew about the Karachais. They were instructed this way. Such betrayal explained the extreme measure. Extreme measures even during an extreme time, even against women, elders, and children. Soldiers and officers were coming after enemies, but could not find them in Karachay Alls. It became a revelation for them. Turned out that brothers, sons, and husbands of these enemies of the people were fighting in the ranks of the Red Army. They were dying on the front in the name of the Soviet homeland. They received medals for heroism in the war against fascists.
Who are they?
My brothers, they're fighting on the front line.
In the box, on top of all things, were photos of 3 sons who were all on the front. When the officer saw them, he teared up and noticed that we were not packing. I was small and they were very old.
Murat Esikuev was 12 years old. His grandfather was 96 and his grandmother was 80. Elders were so shocked. They were just sitting and they did not understand what was happening. According to a decree of eviction, people were allowed to take the necessary amount of belongings and food. However, the amount of things people could grab depended on the human factor, on the particular officer who stepped inside the Karachay house.
There were soldiers on our doorstep. They walked inside the house and behaved in a horrible way.
Sometimes everything was different. Each officer decided on his own exactly how to fulfill a cruel order.
My mother had a box. Half of the box was full of books, works of Lenin, Marx. Her older brother was the secretary of district committee. Those were his books. When the war began, he voluntarily went to the front and left the books to his sister. When we were told to take 30 kilograms each, I could not understand how much that was. 30 kilograms. Soldiers walk around the house. My mother stands in front of the box and cries because we cannot take her brother's belongings. Open it, the officer said. I remember very vividly. His surname was Zhukov. He treated my family honorably. Open it, he says. She opens. He looks inside, picks up books, works of Lenin and Stalin, reports to the district committee.
Сталина. Дальше ковыряется, открывает его собственные труды. Это доклады райкомовские туда-сюда.
Whose are
Чьи,
these?
спрашивает?
They are my
Моего
brother's
брата. Где он?
books.
На войне.
Where is he?
Положи сюда, что
He is on the
можешь.
front.
Еще.
Put anything you can inside the box, aside from the dedicated 30 kilograms. She did it, he said.
Он
He closed the box and told soldiers,
на машину сундук отнести.
take the box to the car.
Вот и такие
Such
были
people
среди
were among all the rest of them.
Понимаешь? Вот этого человека я запомнил.
I remember this man for the rest of my life.
О таких историях помнят
Karachay remembers such stories, as well as Balkaria, from which people were also being deported since March 1944. Balkars.
Был такой случай. Молодой лейтенантик с двумя солдатами.
There was this one time, a young lieutenant with 2 soldiers came to the house of one of our elder women. He saw 4 of her sons who had left for the front. 3 of them had already died.
Его колотило, его, по-моему, взяли там прямо.
He started panicking. He was shaking, and he had to be suspended from the operation. This happened in our village.
И это было в нашем селении.
Крайне тяжело складывалась
Extremely
судьба тех
difficult
семей,
was the destiny of those
которых
families
свои
which were deported separately, elders with grandchildren but without a mother, or sisters with no parents. There was great multitude of separation related to this tragedy. Special center for parentless young people was opened in the city of Frunze, modern Bishkek, only in Kazakhstan's Zambul region as of February 1st, 1944. People searching for their relatives filed over 2,000 applications to the district office and the NKVD commandant's office.
My brother and I found ourselves in different wagons. Our grandmother and grandfather ended up in a different region of Kyrgyzstan, and we got to Kazakhstan with our mother.
Членов одной карачаевской семьи порой раскидывало по всем районам.
Members of one Karachay family have been scattered all over Middle Asia and Kazakhstan. In order to find each other, let alone get an approval to have a family meeting, they had to spend more than 1 year. Ishmael Baramukov was deported with 2 of his sisters. Their mother was not in the village when it all happened. They truly hoped to see her again, but month after month, time passed by. But she was not coming. Even now, he vividly remembers that day when he was working in the garden, and suddenly,
Я вот так поднял этот пятмень. Сейчас настроюсь.
I picked up a hoe,
Смотрю, мать идет.
and then I saw my mother coming.
Я не помню больше.
I don't remember anything else after that.
Очнулся только в комнате.
I woke up in my room, and I felt such happiness.
Это какая радость. Это самая большая радость.
It was the happiest moment of my life.
Из донесений
From the
начальника
report of
управления
NKVD, head of department in Stavropol Brai, Tanchenko, to the Deputies Commissar of Internal Affairs of the USSR Kuglov. In November 1943, 14,774 families have been deported from the Karachay Autonomous Oblast, 68,938 Karachay. After the main contingent had been removed, 329 Karachais were discovered in the area. All of them had been taken to makeshift homes. The total number of deported Karachay citizens is now 69,267.
deportation was total. However, this reference is missing the number of mixed nationalities. They were also frequently deported. For example, this happened to the family of Rosa Kusheva.
My father says, "We're Abyssinians. What right do you have to take us?" The soldiers replied, "We will not discuss that. This is none of your business. We will not discuss this. You and Abyssine can stay. We will take your wife and children."
Complaints or petitions in places where people were relocated did not work. There was no directive from the capital. Local NKVD authorities complained in their inquiries to Moscow. This group of migrants is putting forward a petition to be released from exile. As we do not have your directions on proceedings with regards to such complaints of migrants, we temporarily refuse them their petitions. People from all of the Karachay region were gathered in the points of evacuation before being sent to the echelons. Some people came by foot, and others were brought on trucks. One person remembers. We were driving through Mikoyan Shahar, modern Karachayevsk. The song Goodbye, Beloved City was playing on the speaker. They were saying goodbye to their homeland and their neighbors, to Abazinians, Russians, Circassians, Nogais, with whom they lived side by side for many years. Out of 300 homes in the Circassian Al-Hamara, 40 homes belonged to Karachais. It seemed that the whole all went outside their homes on November 2nd to wave their neighbors farewell.
Окружили дом, солдаты, как я помню, еще чуть-чуть.
Soldiers besieged the house,
Начали
and then cars arrived. They started to load a Studebaker.
И их начали грузить, плачут. И наши плачут.
Our people were crying. My family was crying. Because my mother was a Karachay, she was crying.
Чекуевых. А она тоже плачет, старуха плачет, все плачут. И это самое, ну что делать?
What do we do?
А потом бабушка взяла.
Our grandmother baked bread and pitas at night.
Хлеб, ну чурек тогда было.
She went there to give them bread to eat on the road.
Пошла отдать им на дорогу.
No one wanted to hurt an old woman, so they let her come in, and she was able to give them bread. Old men and women were crying. We will not find peace in this ravine ever again.
The road to exile was different for each Karachay family, away from their home all. But from Zheguta station, they only had one path, following the rail in freight trains, thousands of miles away from home. But not everyone finished this journey.
From the report by head of NKVD Department of Transportation DV Arkadiev to Deputy People's Commissar of Internal Affairs VV Chernyshev regarding the process of relocation of Special Contingent from North Caucasus. As of 6 o'clock, 19 of November 1943, 34 echelons were loaded and reached the point of destination and then unloaded. 31 echelon on the way to the destination, 3 echelons.
This is how the transfer of the repressed people looked on paper, loaded, sent, and delivered. But behind every number were suffering, misery, and deaths of people, tens of thousands of people.
I cannot remember what time it was when we boarded these trains, but I remember that we were actually being loaded onto these wagons like bags, very tightly. There was no space. It was difficult to stand on our feet. And when the train began moving, some old man shouted from the crowd, "Oh people, let me breathe in some air one last time." But nobody could hear him because of the noise. This is how we were traveling. We could only hear the train noise. It was also terrifying.
Allahu Ekber. Allahu Ekber.
No matter the circumstance, these people have been deceived. What they are doing to us is unfair. If the country's leadership were aware of the situation, they would not let this violence continue. All we can do now is hope for Allah's mercy. The Almighty has never abandoned us even through the hardest times. He gave us a chance to survive and save our people. Let us calm our souls, as the Almighty would not abandon us. So let us address our prayers to the Almighty. O Allah, you are the one. We will not reach the lands which you do not behold. We are under your protection. Allah sees everything. He will punish the ones who committed such injustice. Inshallah, O Almighty, give us the joy of seeing our homeland. We are leaving behind the graves of our fathers and grandfathers. O Almighty and our ancestors, we bequeath to you our Caucasus. We are leaving. O Almighty, let us return safely to our homeland. O Almighty, do not deprive us of this joy. Amen, Allah. Let us support each other. Let us love and cherish each other. And if someone stumbles, let us pick him or her up. O Allah, what should we do? Unity is our strength. Let us be united. The Almighty will help us. O Allah.
Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala.
They did not know where they were going. Nobody told them. The uncertainty terrified people, but eventually physical torture was added to their uneasiness. Badly equipped trains were loaded with more than 50 people each. Their belongings were also in the wagons.
The wagon was packed. Nobody had opened the doors for days. People ate and drank very poorly. For 2 to 3 days, the wagon was closed. People wet themselves right there inside the train.
The first ones to fall victim to such inhuman conditions were elderly people. They did not cry for help, and no one really could help them anyway. They quietly faded away to the sounds of the wheels of a train.
On the second day, people started dying on the train. 2 women died on that day in our wagon. Some strange men came in, picked up the corpses and threw them off the train. My sister and I, 2 teenage girls, we witnessed it all looking through the train window.
People were thirsty. The girls were licking cold window glass. They thought it might be wet, so they could fulfill the unbearable thirst.
This is how we were traveling. Sometimes they stopped in a deserted area. Soldiers walked through the wagons looking for something. I am not sure what they were looking for. Then they exited with some sort of bags. They took them outside. 20 to 30 meters away, they dug a hole in the ground and buried the bags. Back then, I did not understand what they were doing. Later, the elders told me. In the bags were people who had died on the way. From the order by the Commissar Chernisov, arranged for the People's Commissariat Health Department to provide a nurse with medical supplies, who could administer medical assistance to those in need during this time of relocation.
However, it was just a plan, but the whole way from Zhezguta to Middle Asia was destined to be filled with graves. But the graves are not there. Relatives have no place to mourn their loss. No time was given to bury the dead, and what really happened to the bodies remains unknown.
Oh, so many died, so many that it was impossible to keep count. The bodies were piling up on top of each other in the wagon like bags. When we were going past a large river, I looked out of the window and saw how they were throwing the bodies into the water.
Ey Kafkas tağlara, yeri tağla, biz nedene yine karabız. Siz acılığıza, biz de acılayız, sizden ayrılıp barabız. Sizden ayrılıp ketip da barabız, ömürlük yaşağın tağladan. Biz Özülgenleyene dağcılaybız Alana sıpıla salla Moskva'dan kelgen
Эшелон, в котором ехали...
Echelon, which Ibrahim Shamanov's family was traveling in, was going through Stalingrad. This city was special to them. It was particularly important for his grandmother to get a glimpse of Stalingrad. Her son was recruited there. There was a hole in the wagon sheathing. Someone broke a piece of board, so the woman rushed there, but she was not able to even get a glimpse of the city.
Бабушка не успела, не забываю, пройти котомки.
My grandmother did not manage to walk past the bags. She screamed son when she fell down.
Споткнулась, оказывается. Она с возгласом сына третью похоронку.
The third death notification came from Stalingrad.
Она получила именно из Сталинграда.
34 эшелона.
34 echelons, 69,267 people. Almost each of them has the same memories of the journey and feelings which come rushing back. Fatality and fear of the unknown. Ishmael Baramukov remembers this boy, tall, handsome, but it is not his appearance he remembers, but his act, an act of true manhood.
Однажды такое получилось. Ну, задыхаемся.
Once this happened. We were choking. The train kept going. Bam, bam. We did not know what to do.
Он вскочил на нару, лег на себя.
Among us was a young man. We jumped up on the plank beds, laid on his back, and started bashing.
Истово. В каком-то состоянии ты запомнил.
He bashed furiously, frantically. He keeps beating and beating. He did not stop. And then air came through. He kept beating as if he did not feel the air coming. Women shouted, "This is enough. Enough already." Only then he laid on his back, and believe it or not, he started singing. Once he came back to his senses, he started singing a song about Imam Shamil.
Немного в Дагестане расскажет вам любой аул, как был подкуплен юнкерами, стоявший ночью караул. Алла верды, Алла бери, громким, красивым голосом. Он, наверное, в этот момент почувствовал.
In that moment, he probably realized the essence of deportation and what freedom was. And this is what encouraged him to sing a song. He realized that he was a man, and he was to help old women, men, and children.
Official numbers state that 653 people did not finish the journey from Karachay to the places of relocation. Many of them simply had no food. According to the report by Gulag's head director to People's Commissar of Internal Affairs, results were as follows. Up to 70% of Karachais reached the destination with no food supplies. They were only the first victims out of the whole nation, sentenced to oblivion. How many more would die throughout 14 years of isolation away from their homeland?
Our battalion lost half of its soldiers. Many were wounded and killed. This fight is remembered as the bloodiest since the Battle of Stalingrad. Others were not easy either. It felt like there was no space on the ground where a grenade did not blow up. It's hard to believe that anyone could have survived this fight.
That is what military doctor and senior lieutenant Abdurrahman Tamirjanov wrote in his diary. He recorded his thoughts and memories throughout the whole time on the front. Since 1941, when he was recruited to join the Red Army after graduating from the medical institute. He joined a high-risk demining battalion in the storming unit. He switched from the front to hospital and backwards 3 times. Military mail effectively delivered Adraman's letters to Karachay. His relatives wrote back too. Since November 1943, there were no more letters from home. Only on January 31st, 1944 did Lieutenant Tamirjanov find out what happened to his homeland.
Received a letter from my teacher. She writes that the whole nation was deported, and not just my family. I walked around. I could not calm down. I lost sleep. I lost my appetite. I got thinner. My heart was filled with resentment and pain, but I was not afraid for my life. I cried with my soul and not with my voice. Back then, I thought I was going crazy. Aside from the shared grief of war, I had my own tragedy, the relocation of my family. So I drowned in grief as if I was in a whirlpool.
Orders of the Red Star, the Great Patriotic War, medals for bravery in defense of Stalingrad. He was rewarded the medal for bravery in the Kremlin by the all-Soviet Union elder Mikhail Kalinin, who called him son because Adraman turned out to be the youngest of all recipients. Later, he was due to be commissioned, but not because of the wounds. He had weak lungs. Still, he requested to remain in the unit.
Dark days have arrived, the most hopeless days I've ever seen in my life. It was a hard hit. I wandered through the trench while realizing my tragedy. Why, I asked. I walked many miles through the paths of war, lost friends. How can I keep living after this?
Then he fought again for his homeland and for Stalin. Same as 15,600 Karachais did on all fronts of the Great Patriotic War.
Я рада приветствовать вас в нашем замечательном музее на экскурсии, посвященной...
I'm glad to welcome you on this tour dedicated to the partisan hero of the Great Patriotic War, Osman Kasayev, whose name is closely connected with our region.
First graders in the village school of Belarus are told why their village is so closely related to the Karachay al-Khuzruk, and what made a man with an unusual name, Osman Kashayev, popular in the region. Even more so, since 1978, one of the school's pioneer teams is named after this man. The partisan's bust is located in Pioneers Hall. On the second floor, there is a museum. Not far from it, there is a monument, where first graders become pioneers. Here, people respect the memory of Osman Kashayev, the Karachay.
Actually, we're here in a sacred place right on this spot. The first partisan unit in Mogilovщина was created in August 1941, which would later be led by Osman Kasayev, a hero of the USSR. Why here? Not far from here is the village Ugolщина, where Fyoklia Naumovich used to live.
In July 1941, soldiers of the Red Army who were fleeing besiegement knocked on her door. The unit's first dugouts appeared on this exact spot. Now, the memorial complex is situated here.
The locals began visiting these 3 Soviet soldiers. Over time, they formed a unit. At first, it was just a unit, but it later became a partisan regiment. In memory of the unit where Kasayev served, the 121st Partisan Regiment was named after him.
By the end of 1943, a unit turned into a regiment, and Osman Kasayev later led it. 1,200 people were under his command. At the same time, his relatives in the Khuzruk Al were pronounced traitors by the Soviet authorities and relocated to Middle Asia. Safe to assume that such messages from the big land did not touch upon this subject. True, why would someone want to disturb the partisan who is fighting so desperately behind enemy lines in the name of the Soviet power?
Of course, in the partisan movement, there were a lot more Karachais and Balkars. This is a photo of a Karachay man, Kipyev Kurman Ramazamovich. He found himself in besiegement in Belarus at the beginning of the Great Patriotic War. He was a soldier of the Red Army. He did not wish to sit back and do nothing, and that is why he joined the partisan movement.
Muradan
Gadjayev from the lower Terberda Al was in charge of the partisan troop named after Shkors in the region of Brest. Shukur Krimshamhalov from the upper Terberda Al was in charge of a platoon in the squad for the Homeland. Kichi Batur Kirajiev from the upper Mara Al served as an assistant commander of the Siano partisan brigade. Yusuf Chumayev fought in the partisan squad for the Homeland, participated in the partisan parade in Minsk on July 16, 1944. Niazi Shashtayev, partisan of the squad named after Suvorov, he was honored with the title Hero of the USSR. Still, this is just a small number of Karachais who left their homes to fight fascists. Osman Kasayev was awarded the title of the Hero of the USSR only in the year 1965, posthumously, but Belarusians were able to express their gratitude a lot earlier, before his peoples were exonerated. Straight after the war, during the Sermaichenka village council meeting, it was decided to rename the village after Osman Kasayev.
Найти более достойную фигуру в нашей истории, которую мы чтим, чем Осман Касаев, чтобы дать будущему поколению.
To find a more noble figure in our history to present to younger generations is impossible.
Героизма, смелости лучше не найти. Поэтому, соответственно, и
This is why the name of our community speaks for itself.
То есть мы оставляем память о том, о проходящих годах,
We keep the memory of war
чтобы воспитать наших людей,
to educate our children with the feeling of heroism.
героизма и ответственности.
Osman Kasayev died of a severe wound on February 18, 1944. It is highly possible that he never discovered that his people were repressed. But even if he did, it is hard to imagine that this man, same as all the other Karachai war veterans, would have fought any differently. Kamid Kanamatov joined the army on the second day of war. By the time he got to the Kalinin front during the period of fierce fighting near Rzhev, he was already a sub-lieutenant. He escaped besiegement near Kalinin, participated in the offensive on Velike Luki. He fought fairly, and then his commander summoned him.
I do not know what to do with you. I tell him, Colonel, I do not understand what the people are accused of. There was an order. Remove all the Karachai from the front.
Карачаевской национальности. Тогда я опустился и говорю, товарищ полковник.
I tell him, Colonel, I do not understand what the people are accused of.
Понятия не имею. И в чем повинен мой народ, я не знаю.
The All-Union Leninist Young Communist League raised me, and I have to fight. If you cannot trust me to lead the platoon, let me stay as a junior communications technician, but I have to fight. He hugged me and said that we will fight against other fascists together.
Будем воевать вместе против фашистов. Вот это.
This is how I first found out about the deportation of my people.
Kamid Kanamatov remained in the army. He was among those who took Königsberg in 1945. But as for the award presentations, as well as a medal for bravery in winning Königsberg, his nationality was listed as Korean. The same thing happened to Lieutenant Tamirjanov. His nationality was changed so that he could stay on the front and keep fighting.
Было прямое указание о снятии с фронта, отправлении в места депортации. Но многие, вернее, даже, скажем так, не многие.
There was a direct order of removal of individuals from the front to places of deportation.
Либо по мотивам просьбы самого военнослужащего, либо по мотивам как бы ценного бойца.
But individual commanders took responsibility and kept the Karachai on the front.
Репрессированных, депортированных народов, в том числе карачаевского народа на фронте. И чтобы предупредить вот такие моменты, что мало проверка бывала там особых отделов и так далее, именно поэтому те солдаты, офицеры, которые вот предыдущих своих наградных...
In order to avoid being caught, by 1944, the Karachais in the army turned into Kazakhs, Ozatans, and Tatars.
В 1945 году в документах числятся казахами, киргизами, осетинами, татаринами и так далее.
Out of more than 15,000 Karachais who were recruited, more than 9,000 soldiers did not return to their homes. Karachais were deprived of their homeland on the basis of this order issued by the Presidium of the Supreme Council of the USSR. People were accused of the following. During the occupation, Karachais behaved as traitors, betrayed honest Soviet citizens, led the way to German forces. Order issued by the Presidium of the Supreme Council of the USSR regarding elimination of the Karachay Autonomous Region dates back to October 12, 1943. It turns out that it was 3 weeks left until the deportation, and people were still making their plans. They dreamed, they wanted something, and authorities in the capital were trying to calm them down by saying that everything is fine. They expressed gratitude for the people's contribution to achieving victory. Generalissimo Stalin sent his fraternal greetings to collective farmers and workers of Malo-Karachayevsky district. He also expressed gratitude to the Red Army for collecting 1 million rubles to build warplanes, Karachay, Kolkozhnik.
No doubt there was collaboration in Karachay, but it was present on all occupied territories. In Baltic states, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Russia, obviously the North Caucasus, there were collaborators everywhere. Actually, all of German occupational policy was built on this fact. They structured local national or ethnic governing bodies in a way that were controlled by the German administration. The Karachais were not an exception.
Looking back at historical sciences, there is no unified opinion on the actual reasons of deportation. A few possible explanations are being discussed.
Why the Karachais? What happened? Why them? First of all, I remember the order issued by the Karachay-Cherkess Commission for Rehabilitation in 1992. It says the following. This action's aim was to split the region between 3 entities: Stavropol Krai, Krasnodar Krai, and Georgia. Behind this action were, as they say, Beria and Suzlov.
Karachay titles and names quickly turned into Georgians. Georgian immigrants who occupied the empty Karachay houses felt that titles in their language were more to their liking. Instead of Mikoyan Shahar, it was the previous name of Karachayevsk, came Klukori. The Kuzruk Al became Zedvaki. Instead of Uchkulan came Mednishkevi. Kart, Gert became Mitish. Dziri. Even the Elbrus mine was renamed into Georgian language, the Magaro mine. Moreover, Uchkulan and Mikoyan districts were added to the Georgian SSR. In order to confirm the validity of the geographical scenario of resettlement, scientists need archive materials, which have not been presented to the public yet. They call the interests by some leaders and activists of the Soviet and Republican scale of the time blank spots, as well as involvement of the Soviet elites in arranging the deportation and, as a result, redivision of the border in the North Caucasus. However, it could not only be a matter of borders.
As far as I know from the documents, it was the failure of partisan movement in Karachay and Stavropol Krai, which was led by Suzlov. He failed, and they had to justify it. And in order to justify it, they had to present indigenous minorities as traitors. So it seemed that the partisan movement failed because of them. Partisan movement still existed. They fought, but not on the same scale as it was planned by the party's apparatus.
Aside from abstract accusations, the Kremlin backed Karachais for 2 rather particular episodes of so-called treason.
Но вот тут вот начинаются уже действительно любопытные вещи, которые потом легли как обвинение против карачаевского народа.
Here's where the curious facts begin with the accusations against the Karachay people.
Оккупационной администрации. А еще в момент отступления Красной армии и наступления...
During the period of the Red Army's retreat in summer 1942, the armed gangs, which were later incorporated into German collaboration structures, committed two crimes.
Соответственно, составили костяк формирований, которые были подконтрольны немцам. Вот они совершили два преступления. Во-первых, это преступление, связанное с уничтожением эвакуированного Армавирского детского дома. 60 с лишним детей убили.
First, they destroyed the Armavir orphanages and killed more than 60 children and took 500 soldiers hostage. About 100 of them were later shot. Two of these crimes were blamed on the Karachay.
Вот еще одно преступление, то есть более полутысячи красноармейцев. Вот эти два преступления потом вменялись в вину. В обоих этих
The reports have lots of blank spots and inconsistencies, but then it later became clear that the archives of the Ministry of Defense could not confirm those facts. There's simply no data, and the accusations were raised after deportation took place.
Обвинения формировались уже тогда, когда карачаевцы были депортированы.
Речь, в частности, идет о воспитанниках Евпаторийского детдома.
In particular, it concerns foster children of the Yevpatoria orphanage, who were first evacuated to Armavir and then sent to the area of Lower Taberda. During the war, the main military prosecutor's office dropped all accusations against individual inhabitants of this village, who were earlier accused of shooting children. It was later brought to light that those orphans never even reached Karachay. As regard to the Red Army soldiers, examinations of the Stavropol prosecutor's office clearly determined there were no facts to confirm that 500 Red Army fighters were taken hostage and that 100 of them were murdered in Uchkalan. However, all of these conclusions were made much later. In 1943, some far-fetched reasons were enough to arrange the repressions of ethnic minorities, as if Karachays collaborated with fascists to destroy Jews. That was one more reason to approve deportation. Jerusalem, Yad Vashem, World Holocaust Remembrance Center. On the stone plates are the names of 26,513 people from 51 countries. They are recognized as saints of all people in the universe. This title is usually awarded to non-Jewish people who saved Jews throughout the years of Nazi occupation of Europe. The Russian stone plate includes the name of Kolomiev's family from Taberda. Between August 1942 and January 1943, three sisters, Gedman, Bronislava, Faina, and Lina, used to hide in their home.
Один из сыновей, Мухтар, знаком, до этого был знаком с девушками, с тремя сестрами, Гейдман.
One of the sons, Mukhtar, knew the three Gaidman sisters. They used to work at the Mikoyan Shahar hospital. Everyone started evacuating as the Germans were coming.
Все начинают уходить, немцы наступают. Девушки не знают, что им делать, как убежать. Он разговаривает с этими девушками, он с ними до этого уже был.
The girls did not know what to do or how to escape.
Сажает их на машину, он работал водителем, и привозит в дом своего отца.
So he put them in his car and brought them to my father Shamail's house.
И рассказал, говорит, вот не знаем, что делать. Девочки испуганные, заплаканные.
And then my grandfather said, let's keep them in our family. What happens to us happens to them too.
С нами, то и произойдет, и с ними произойдет.
Благодаря этому деянию три семьи.
Because of this action, three sisters were rescued in contrast to most of the Jewish population who found themselves in the region at this time and who did not have any hope for help. It is very difficult to look deep down in one's soul so many years later to understand why they did this. From the family's file, it becomes obvious that the head of the family made this firm decision. It was a traditional Muslim family and no one could make such a decision but the head of the family. He had some doubts, but then referred to Allah and said this was something that had to be done. This is how he translates God's will. that it is necessary to help people in a time of need. An act of salvation of the Jewish family was motivated by religious ideas.
Божественное повеление, что надо помогать ближнему в такой тяжелый момент. Акт спасения, спаситель еврейской семьи, он был мотивирован религиозными соображениями.
It was a difficult decision. The Homeland family, Shamael and Ferdaus, had 11 children. They risked being executed for giving shelter to Jews. Moreover, sisters were already grown up. They escaped from fascists, arrived from Kiev and settled in Karachay. The eldest girl, Bronislava, took a job in a military hospital. Younger girls, Faina and Lena, continued studying in a local teacher training institute. But in order to hide from Germans, their names during the period of a 5-month Karachay occupation became Arimiat, Fatima, and Asiat.
It was possible to deceive the Germans by putting national clothing on girls, but everyone in the Awil knew how many children Shamael had. Everyone knew and understood very well who these girls were and what their nationality was. Notices were hanging on every corner, saying that all Jews were obliged to show up at the administration. They were rounded up and then they were shot dead.
Fascists never discovered the sisters. None of the fellow villagers told on Shamael Hamaliov to the authorities.
Свидетельство о благородстве карачаевской семьи. Его вручил в Москве 26 апреля.
Here it is, the certificate of bravery of one Karachay family. It was awarded to the middle brother Hamaliov, Sultan, in Moscow on April 26, 1995, by Israel's ambassador to Russia. At the top of the certificate were pictures of a menorah and the eternal flame. Writing in English it says, "Who saved one life, saved the whole world." Below was the reference, Commission on awarding the title Saints of the Peoples of the World and Center of Remembrance express its sincerest gratitude to Shamael and Ferdaus Halemliev and their sons Mukhtar and Sultan, who risked their lives to save the oppressed Jews during the years of the Holocaust in Europe.
Подвергавшихся преследованиям евреев.
There are many such examples in Karachay during wartime.
The kind acts of this family gives new colors to the world, which we need to pass on from generation to generation so that the next generations understand ideas of humanity and how important it is to help people in time of need. This family not only risked their own lives, they even risked the lives of their children.
The Halamliev family and Gaidman sisters did not lose touch during the war. Even more so, when the Karachay deportations began, girls knocked on every door to say, "These are noble people. They saved us and do not deserve to be treated this way."
They attempted to report to the Soviet authorities about the actions of this family, about their bravery, but it did not influence the decision to deport this family. Everyone had to be deported.
The Gaidman sisters found the Halamliev family in Kyrgyzstan. One of them even visited to show her support. She managed to get the approval to relocate the whole family from Pakhta Orala to the town of Frunze. In the new places of dislocation, many people supported Karachais. Ordinary Soviet people, they did not consider Karachais enemies or traitors.
In 1946, I was in the first grade. I was hungry and my face was swollen. A young female teacher walks into the classroom. She held books in one hand and a basket full of bread pieces in the other. It was for the children. There were 30 Karachais in this class. Her name was Maria Pavlovna Kulikova, the kindest soul.
After returning home, he has been trying to find her for 17 years. People said she was already dead, but he found her. He even visited her in Frunze to thank her. Then she visited him in Karachay. Shaldovar Merzagul, Hungry Steppe. Pakta, Aral, Kilzalkia, small prairie towns and villages which are difficult to find on the map. But these people, they remember these names forever. Pakta Aral Station, several houses in the Kazakh prairie, it became the starting point of a 14-year exile for many Karachais. They were brought here, and from this station they also returned home. But not everyone returned, only those who survived.
Asia took my grandmother, grandfather, my younger brother, and my aunt.
Echelons were met at the station. As it turns out now, authorities considered all stages of deportation, so it says in the orders issued 1 month before its beginning. In a decree from the People's Commissars Council of Kazakhstan from October 1943, it clearly stated how to transfer, where to settle those people. They were put on different collective farms and state farms. Authorities would give them empty buildings to live in, or they would send migrants to live in collective farmers' homes.
We got to the Lenin collectivist farm. It was barely snowing on that day. We were given a house which only had walls made of mud bricks and had no roof.
Winter was coming, possibly the coldest one of all of the years of deportation. Not everyone survived it. According to different reports, the special resettlers were given an opportunity to build houses out of mud and pice-walled houses, or they could occupy the empty houses and reconstruct them. There were plans, but the reality turned out to be different. People survived winter as they could. There were lucky ones, who Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and Russians let inside their homes.
One man walked up to my father and offered him shelter. We went to his house. It was a big house, and he gave us 2 rooms. They had a good farm with cows. When they milked the cows, they shared the milk with us.
By December 1943, in the regions of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, 15,987 families have been settled. 68,614 people from former Karachay Autonomous Region, including 12,500 men, 19,444 women, and 36,670 children. They were settled in 480 villages in Middle Asia.
Мне повезло. Когда мы туда доехали, мне повезло тем,
I was lucky to be settled in an all-German village. Germans are educated people. We were walking around hungry. Behind our house was a German house. There was a woman, Matilda. She had a son, and we were the same age. Yakov, come eat, she said. Then she shouted, Abdullah. My name is Abdullah. She called for me to come. She fed me.
Hunger. The feeling of hunger never goes away. You cannot be distracted. You cannot forget about it. Every minute it is there, even when you fall asleep. It is like a nail stuck in your head, to find anything, to put anything in your mouth, to relieve hunger even a little, even for a little while.
My father came back from work tired and says, I buried 4 people today. They died of hunger as well as of illness. Most of them were children. I saw orphans begging for food. I will never forget that. In my childhood, my mother cooked corn, and she gave seeds to all these children as if they were chickens. She did not give 1 cob to each of them, because that way they would each get an equal amount of food. We pecked corn like birds.
It was incredibly difficult for families with toddlers.
The poor mother could not feed her youngest toddler because she had no milk. The baby was very weak. He later died of hunger. 2 brothers and my sister died there. In Kazakhstan, my sister and the youngest brother died of hunger. My middle brother died of an infection, measles. One evening, my father said something to my mother while wiping the tears away. My mother also cried, and I still listened to them. My poor girls, today I left them with no bread. When I walked home, I saw the children. They were hungry, and their feet were swollen. They could barely walk, so I gave them our loaf of bread. It was horrifying to look at them.
Hunger did not choose. From day to day, from month to month, the Karachay elders, children, and women lived with this feeling. The only difference between them was that children begged for food, and grown-ups did not allow themselves to complain. They quietly suffered because they were unable to feed the children, to help the children who were dying before their eyes.
We've been through so much suffering. Even nowadays, if I see a breadcrumb on the floor, I pick it up and put it in my mouth. My daughters do not like that. They say, "You're bringing back memories of hunger." And I tell them, I know the value of this breadcrumb. I went through hunger. We used to dream of eating as much bread as possible.
It is unknown what was more terrifying, to see your children die or to die from hunger yourself, while realizing that your children will be left all alone, desperate, without help, with no illusions that they will not be suffering.
Haj Umar walked up to my father and said, "Gika, there was a family from Mara. They used to live next to us, but I have not seen them for 3 to 4 days. I haven't seen their door opened at all. I'm afraid something might have happened to them. Why don't we go there and check whether they are all right?" My father agreed, and they went to the house. When I heard that, I ran after them. When we opened the door, some black flies rushed through the open door. I got very scared. When we entered the house, we saw a terrifying scene. The father's swollen dead body was lying on the floor, and his children, 3 sons, Haji Bekir, Hussein, and Gicha, and the 2 twin girls, Saniyat and Aniyat, did not know what to do and just sat there for days looking at his dead body.
Many others witnessed and went through the same tragedy. They saw how their loved ones and neighbors died, how people went through hunger, lived in dugouts, barracks, even in barns, how they searched for anything to eat.
We used to eat anything we could find. Sometimes when a truck passed by and there were wheat seeds falling out of the back, we ran after the truck to pick up those seeds from the dust and chewed on them. This is how we were initially surviving.
People were dying of hunger and illnesses. Weakened bodies fought with every breath, tried to hang on to life, but in the end, there was no strength left. Rosa Aisanova recalls the words of her mother about the death of her son, Rosa's brother, while 3 of her uncles were fighting on the front.
Vova was older than me. He got sick by drinking the water. The water was contaminated. My younger sister got sick too. She was only 7 years old. The youngest boy had not even turned 1 yet. They both died because of that water. The oldest one was taken to a hospital. There was a bucket on the stove. The children drank from it. And said, "Mother, I'm thirsty." There were 2 meters between the bed and the stove. I turned around to pick up a cup of water and returned to my son. But he had already died. I wrapped him into a blanket and stayed next to him all night. The next morning, we buried him.
People tried to bury the bodies following all of the necessary traditions. Stronger elderly people dug the graves, read the prayers. But it only happened this way at the beginning. Eventually, there were less and less elderly people, so women and teenagers had to bury the dead.
The funerals took place in such a way that we did not even have a cloth to cover the dead child with. If we could find a bedsheet, we were all very happy. We used to put 2 to 3 bodies in one grave. There was no one who could dig. People were dying of hunger. What else did they not see?
They saw and felt a lot throughout those years, even children. Such atrocities they could not imagine even during the hungry wartime. But it turned out anything could happen.
There was a neighbor, her last name was Alakayeva. Her husband, Chakarov, Hamid Ismailovich, joined the army and vanished. They had 8 children, and so the woman disappeared as well. One day, my grandmother's nephew came up to me and said, "People came and said that a woman's body was discovered in the desert. She looked similar to Galaka. The dogs and ravens teared her body apart. While everyone was crying, they went there to identify the corpse. It was her. Her whole body was swollen up. It was a terrifying sight. The birds and ravens and dogs were tearing apart the body of this poor woman. Nobody dared to come any closer to collect her remains. It was such a difficult sight to see."
On March 8, 1944, Balkars were stripped of their homeland.
We were such a government-oriented people that we could not believe it. We were told that the Karachay were deported. How can they deport a whole nation? It is impossible. You can put one guilty person in prison, but how do you punish a whole nation? How?
They were accused of the same crimes as the Karachais, that they were traitors, collaborationists. It was claimed that the Balkars poorly invested against the occupants and that Balkaria was unable to protect Elbrus in general. These 2 particular accusations were assigned personally to the People Commissar of Internal Affairs, Lavrenti Baria. Innocent people started dying on the way. Sometimes bodies were hidden among the living to bring them to a destination and bury them with dignity, but it rarely worked.
One woman, Kaimez Tapakshanova, died in our wagon. We were about to reach the destination. Children were moved to the doors, and behind us women hid her body so that it would not be thrown off the train. My grandmother, Galambikova, mother of my mother, was taken off the train and left on the road in the middle of nowhere.
37,703 Balkars were deported. 14 echelons were formed at the Nalchik train station. Each had 56 wagons. Every wagon was stuffed with 40 to 45 people. According to documents, every train was marked with the code North Caucasus 455. Destination Middle Asia.
At the beginning of the 3rd month, my youngest brother died. He was 8 months old. My mother did not have any milk. There was nothing to eat. Everyone was starving, and then it started. During the next 18 months, 6 children died in our family. The last victim was our father. At first we dug proper graves, 1.5 meters long and 1 meter wide, and then we became more hungry and tired. We dug smaller holes, 50 to 60 centimeters deep. Wild dogs started coming for meat, dug out of the corpses. Oh my God, I remember it as if it happened today. They fought each other, pulling the guts out of each other's mouths.
Almost every Balkar family, same as the Karachais, lost at least one family member on the front. They were fighting for the Soviet homeland. The memorial plates in the village of Upper Balkaria show the names of those who never returned. 5, 10, 15 names from one family: Atabiev, Bosiev, Jean Gorazov, Misirov, Natsoyev, Osmanov, Tamirjanov, Timukiev. Nearly 5,000 people died of the hands of fascists. In remote Kyrgyz and Kazakh villages, their deported sons wanted to go to the front. They wanted to prove their innocence. They are not enemies.
People were rushing into battle as if the war would end and they would not become heroes.
They became heroes on the labor fronts.
The migrants did not work out of fear, but because of their convictions. Labor was the main factor that determined survival, or how one could adapt to local conditions.
This is the scientist's explanation, but special migrants did not think about it. They simply worked, as they were used to. They did not know any better, and for this labor, their homeland, which accused them of treason, awarded Balkars and Karachais.
In order to be awarded with government titles while living in deportation, you had to make labor achievements that could be considered world records. 3 people became heroes of social labor. Tens of others were awarded with the Order of Lenin and Order of the Red Banner. Hundreds were awarded with medals for labor heroism, labor achievements, and so on.
These people were pronounced enemies, and as punishment, they were deprived of their homeland and sent away, but they kept working, as if for spite, despite any obstacles, even though they cannot prove anything with labor. But at least they could show their country that they are Soviet citizens too. They want victory as much, and they try to bring this victory closer.
I get surprised when nowadays someone says the crops yield almost 300 to 400 hectares. We used to collect 800 back in the day. Karachai women, the true heroes of the USSR, used to collect 1,200 to 1,300 hectares.
For the purposes of maintaining control over deportees and those heroes of labor and frontmen, special commandant's offices were established to have every person registered, with a monthly compulsory checkup. For every disobedience, including disobeying the commandant, settlers risked administrative and criminal punishment.
From the order of Presidium of the Supreme Council of the USSR, with the aim of consolidation of the settlement regime, for any unauthorized absence or escape from places of settlement, the accused are due to be punished with 20 years of penal servitude. Effectiveness of this order was closely monitored.
But going back to their homeland, to Karachai, to Elbrus, its rivers and alls, at least in their dreams and memories, no one could take that away.
Between the age of 2 and 6 years old, I spent days with my grandfather in the garden. Every tree was familiar. All of this was before my eyes.
Sen kökçe temiyikse Uvak tavlanı içinde Miyala kebek cıltıray Kanla buzların üstünde vardı ak donum Sen cayratıştaki yeser Gün bozulur da terrese Boran eter gesüyese
Еще мечтали. Вот закончится война.
They also dreamed that the war would end, that victory would come, and they would no longer be considered enemies, as sons, brothers, husbands, who fought for this victory together with the rest of the country will return. And then finally everyone will understand that Karachais and Balkars are innocent, that they just made a mistake in Moscow. People had this faith, and this is why they waited for the victory day with a special feeling. Finally, May 9th arrived.
Я как сегодня помню, радость такая, торжество такое, объявили.
I remember it as if it happened today. Such happiness, triumph. It was announced. The war is over. We were not allowed to join this triumph, but we were allowed to not work that day. We gathered in groups. Widows who had received death notifications, there were 6 of them. They sat around the fire. They hugged their knees and just sat there. Tears were streaming down their faces. A demobilized lieutenant stood next to them. There were combat awards on his chest.
Военной гимнастерки. У него орден Отечественной войны и 2 боевые медали. Он стоял рядом, да.
He stood there, and one of his eyes started filling with tears. They wet his blouse, but he did not notice. He stood silently. The women sat next to him and just cried. From the order of the Presidium of the Supreme Council of the USSR, with the aim of consolidation of the settlement regime for Chechens, Karachais, English, Kalmyk, Germans, Crimean Tatars, Balkars, etc., it is necessary to establish that resettlement is eternal, with no right of return to prior places of residence.
Приехали офицеры, их 2-3 года как бы признавали.
The most terrifying part began afterwards. The officers arrived. For 2 to 3 years, they were recognized as participants of the great event, the great victory, and we had to consider them equals.
Но в 1948 году, 26 ноября,
But on November 26, 1948, by the order of the Presidium of the Supreme Council came out, which stated that all front men had to be registered as prisoners, the same as us.
Их зачислили тоже в числе арестантов, как и нас.
И это был еще один.
It was one more hard hit for the hopes of the whole community. People sentenced to oblivion.
Приговоренных к забвению.
Старик Абдул, который с нами там жил, он говорит,
The old man Abdul, who lived with us, said, maybe someday you will leave, but we will stay.
мы останемся. Только как поедешь, пойдешь в
If you return, you go to Vajnaya, drink some water and kiss the rocks. He never returned.
Снежные барсы над Карачаем носятся быстро среди гор. Бурно по склонам воды Кубани ты выпускаешь на простор.
В конце 48 года на учете состояло.
By the end of 1948, 15,425 Karachai families, 56,869 people, 29,284 grown-ups were registered. During the first years of life in exile, a lot more people were dying compared to being born. Even men's return from the front did not immediately fix this tendency. Before October 1st, 1948, the resettled minorities of the North Caucasus had 28,120 children and 146,892 people died. Only since the beginning of 1949, birth rate has finally overcome the death rate.
Actually, I tried meat after 1949. When I was in the horse factory, a horse either died or was butchered. But anyway, they gave us a piece of meat. Thank God they did not give us pork. We would have eaten anything, though. You have to understand, the hunger was unbearable. It was excruciating. One does not know where to find food. Even children, with their dead father or mother laying next to them, they still keep looking for something to eat. Nowadays, if you miss lunch or dinner, it is already considered hunger. But back then, hunger can be compared to a disease. Day and night people thought about food, just to find anything to eat.
March 5th, 1953. Joseph Stalin dies in Kuntsevo Dacha in Moscow Oblast. It seemed the whole country mourned his death. On the other hand, it became another chance for amnesty, a chance to achieve freedom.
I remember the year 1953, when Stalin died. Our teacher, Vasily Cherny, comes to his students, caresses their head and says, "Do not cry, children, do not cry. We have good doctors." I mean, do not believe it. He was probably happy on the inside, but he still comforted us.
According to the amnesty dated from March 26, 1953, more than 1 million prisoners were freed. However, it did not include the repressed communities. To deport those people was a matter of hours, but to exonerate them, it took a while. At the age of 15 to 16 years old, I realized who I was, an enemy of the people. I am a criminal, deported for crimes. What my crimes could possibly be at the age of 6 years old, I do not know. The most painful part is that my father was at war, his brother was at war, and my mother's 3 brothers were at war. 5 men in total, but at the same time, 5 children, including me, and elders were sent to exile. Nevertheless, people could not stop believing and hoping. Karachay was their homeland.
There was not one dream in which I did not imagine seeing the Caucasus again. For 14 years, there was not one day when I did not dream about my homeland. Can you imagine? Anguish, anguish. My whole chest hurt of anguish. I spent my youth there. I met my first love there. I went to school there. Not once did I have a dream about Middle Asia after returning home.
For Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Russians, and other peoples, this place was home. But it became a strange home. A home full of hard labor.
Казахи сами очень много испытали. И поэтому
Kazakhs themselves went through a lot.
Когда приезжают страдающие люди,
which is why any time the suffering people arrived, they would share their last piece of bread with these people.
относились не как к к врагам. Вообще такого понятия
We did not treat them as enemies.
в нашей
We did
степи
not
не
have
было.
such concepts in our prairie.
Только как к страдающим людям. Поэтому так как мы сами
We, Kazakhs, the suffering nation, understood how unfair it all was.
насколько это все несправедливо.
И без этой поддержки и понимания
Without the support and understanding of the common people who did not lead wealthy lives, it would have been impossible for Karachais, Balkars, Chechens, and Ingush to survive in the region. Much later, in 1973, Oljas Suleimanov wrote a revealing poem, especially in terms of the Soviet times, about Kazakhstan, Wild Fields. It was a story about things that Kazakhs were feeling throughout the years of mass repression.
Я бы мог появиться в горах и не зваться казахом, или жить в белой хатке, коров по оврагам
I could appear in the mountains and not be called the Kazakh, or live in the white hut, or graze cows in the ravine. No matter what, if only I was brought to Dzhizkazgan as a prisoner, Ukraine, forgive me.
Обращался ко всем, по сути дела, ко всем.
O English, forgive my land. In this poem, I addressed all these people.
Моя земля становилась каторгой. Вот. И говорил, что земля
Who suffered on my land. Karachai people also went through challenges of Kazakhstan.
Испытание Казахстаном прошел и Карачаевский.
Moreover, a challenge of Kyrgyzstan.
For me, Kyrgyz are like brothers. We never argued. We lived side by side. We worked as brothers.
Malovodnaya village. It was considered Russian when Karachais arrived there, but eventually it became Karachais too.
When was the last time you've been to the Caucasus? Oh, I think 14 years ago. Do you wish to return? What now? I have been there 5 times.
Постоянно на похороны ездил. Были.
So now Kyrgyzstan is your homeland? No, we were born back there.
Все оттуда.
We are all Tebridians.
And Uchkulans, Kurzuks, Zhegutins, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan never became their homeland, even though they lived there. Homeland is one and only. It is Karachai. But now it is their home. Graves of their loved ones are now here, the ones who began this difficult journey on November 2nd, 1943, which became their life journey.
Who lies in that grave?
Отец, мать,
My father, mother, brother, sister, grandmother, another sister.
сестра еще.
We barely had time to bury the dead.
Не успевали хоронить.
They grew up here, met each other, built a house on the edge of Bishkek and raised their children. Their whole life has passed there.
My children have settled down. My daughter is married now. My second daughter is also married. My son is still single. They stayed. They could not return. Everyone who was born there is homesick.
Jurievka village. Inglishkan Urusova has lived in this house for 7 years. She never went back home to Karachai.
I got married here and had 8 children. I raised them. This was my whole life. Thanks to God, my children have now settled down and they all have families. And I still live in this old house.
For various reasons, about 12% of Karachais and Balkars remained in Middle Asia, as a result of the all-Soviet population census of 1989, right before the collapse of the USSR, mainly in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, there lived 4,743 Karachais and 5,098 Balkars. Uchkalan ensemble in Kyrgyzstan is more than just an ensemble. It performs the famous lezginka and many other Caucasian dances. But here, it is a part of the homeland, which is always near. But they did have to earn their place under the sun. Highland people's traditions, memory of history and culture of the whole peoples, not only help them to survive, remain as a nation, but to achieve respect of other nations. In these places, people still know what Karachay is and how good its people are.
The main stage of the country is the National Philharmony. The hall is always filled with people. There are 1,108 seats. People do not want to leave at the end of the show. If some show is boring, people leave. But in our case, the crowd wants to keep watching. Our audience consists of different nationalities.
In July 1956, the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev admitted to the Karachevs were subjected to repressions by mistake, and Stalin's personality cult was the one to blame. Official return to Caucasus began in 1957, but only by 1989, Karachay deportations, as well as other nations under Stalin, were recognized as a criminal action. Still, to get recognition and be allowed to become a part of the homeland again was the hardest task. In 1956, delegations from Karachay traveled to Moscow twice, on June 23rd and July 4th, to meet with Nikita Khrushchev. As it turns out, the last meeting was crucial. It lasted for about 50 minutes. Memories of the participants of the meeting. Our nation, Taubay Kurjayev, addressed Khrushchev, wants to go home after 12 years in exile. Elders want to rest their bones where their fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers are buried. Dear Nikita Sergeyevich, our nation is asking you for one thing. Give us our civil rights back so that we could be equal with the rest of the people in the Soviet Union. By July 16th, all special resettlement limitations were lifted off Karachais. However, it did not mean that they were allowed to return or to be politically exonerated. From the punished nation, they became a pardoned nation.
Suddenly some good news has arrived. The Karachay people can go back home. Aliyev Rakai and 2 other delegates of that group that went to Moscow told us about that. My father's brother, Isa Ali, organized a celebration, butchered a bull, and invited everyone over. Also, Hachi Said from Kumish organized a concert and some dances. Generally, there was a lot of joy everywhere, and I still cannot forget how many people died of hunger, how they dropped onto the ground and died in front of our eyes.
May 3rd, 1957 became a meaningful date for the nation. The first echelons with Karachais on board arrived back to the homeland, including the Zhiguta station, from which they were sent to exile 14 years ago.
Suddenly we could see how every day the people started to prepare for departure with more enthusiasm. And then there was an announcement. A train had become available, and the people could book seats. We arrived back at the place we had been deported from, to Ust-Zhiguta. In Zhiguta, the trucks were already waiting for us to bring us to our homes.
Они возвращались домой, но своих домов многие не узнали.
They returned, but they could not recognize their homes. Strange people lived there, and no one was going to simply give back the Karachais their homes. According to the law, this nation did not get any right to demand their property back. Many of them had to buy their own houses.
В Жигуте поезд остановился, я сошел, а там говорят.
The train stopped in Utsdeguta, and they tell us, the unloading will take place in the morning, but I could wait to see the garden. I walked through the ravine for a long time. I reached my house and saw some strange people outside. I thought to myself, no. I turned around. There was a trail near their garden, so I followed it. I jumped through the stone fence and up to the garden. I was over the moon. It reminded me of my childhood.
Вот тут я был на 7-м небе. Вспомнил все свое детство.
Still, there were some people who waited for Karachais. The first stop, Nogai Station, Irkan, Shahar. And so, 14 years later, home.
Все люди, старики, женщины прибежали сюда на станцию встречать.
All elders, the women ran to the station to meet Karachai.
И дети, все выбегали.
Children ran too.
Женщины приносили кубанскую воду, ведра.
They brought Kuban water in the buckets.
Некоторые нагайские
Some brought Nogai tea.
поили их чаем.
Women cried tears of happiness.
Ну, вот такая встреча была, в общем, здесь. Вот. Некоторые ночевали от радости, женщины даже плакали в вагоне, который карачаевцы.
We arrived back home, and at the first train stop, some Nagais met us with tears falling down their cheeks, filled with happiness. Their eyes were so pure. They waited for us all night. They gave us water and different traditional dishes. They met us with an accordion and laughter. We must never forget that, ever.
There were many people. We enjoyed the moment together. There were so many people, the whole population of Kobenhog, of my aunt, Erkenhog, of Edelhog. Everyone was there. The young people, no matter familiar or strange, we saw it all together. Of course, we celebrated when we found out that the Karachai families were going to remain in our Ol. Karachai families stayed with us.
Cherkess Autonomous Region was transformed into Karachai Cherkess Autonomous Region within Stavropol Krai. The old names were returned. Klukore and Zedvaki were gone, as well as Mednishkevi and Mitis Dziri. In Stavropol's universities, admission quotas were arranged for Karachais. According to the all-Soviet census of 1959, the number of Karachais in the USSR reached 81,403 people. Again, it felt like those 14 years never happened. Films were made about how good and interesting the life of the Karachais is in the Soviet Union. However, authorities took their time with political exoneration until the year 1989. Kazakh poet Oljaz Suleimanov used to be a member of the Supreme Council of the USSR. He remembers the meeting when the idea of political exoneration first came up in the conversation.
Мы, казахи, на этой каторге родились.
We, the Kazakhs, were born in places of hard labor.
Страна становилась каторгой.
My country became a source of punishment for many nations.
Это все переживал, наблюдал, общался.
I had been witnessing it since childhood. I lived with it and made friends with peers from other countries.
Ровесниками вот из этих народов. Карачаевцы, балкарцы, ингуши, чеченцы, крымские татары.
I had a right to be the first one to step forward and propose such a draft legislation.
Первым выйти на трибуну и предложить вот такой проект закона.
An objection was raised, saying that such an offer was legally incorrect. According to the law, only one particular person could be exonerated, but not the whole nation.
I interrupted him and said, "So it is not a problem to repress the whole nation, but it is impossible to exonerate them."
Грянули аплодисменты, весь зал это воспринял.
Then came applause, and there was no more discussion. The offer was accepted, and the project work began.
И работа над законом началась, над проектом закона началась.
On November 14, 1989, the declaration of the Supreme Council of the USSR about recognizing as unlawful and criminal the repressive acts against nations which were subject to forceful resettlement and about assuring their rights. On April 26, 1991, the RSFSR Law on Exoneration was published. 46 years later, authorities admitted that a mistake was made and corrected it once and for all. But only grandchildren and children achieved justice. For those who were sentenced to oblivion, those who could not bear the journey, who died of hunger and illnesses in exile, stigmatized as traitors.
Karcha stone. Here in the Caucasus, in the Karachay Mountains, where Kuban flows, crashing, its chest dug in the ground, meeting centuries. Karcha stone is up high, with the sounds of steel. If the ground trembles, it becomes even more untamed. It survives. Let the wave dry down in Kuban. They say it has the same roots as Elbrus, even though only its top is seen above the ground, saying goodbye to Karachay on the darkest day of all, not to lose connection with Homeland. Ancestors took pieces of the stone, believing they could find happiness after returning home. On the dark day, leaving the mountains, my people took a piece of stone to exile, kissed it, and kept it for years. Asking fate to let them return home. Peaks awaited its masters to come back. From the prairie, which whitened in grief from the eyes of the suffering peoples, hopeful tears were falling in the darkness of nights. The night that was long above the mountains disappeared. The ancestor stone recognized its peace, and upon return, people hung their stone, warmed by the sun of truth, in their homeland.
During the time of the illegal resettlement of the Karachay people, 43,000 people died, including 22,000 children. At the same time, more than 15,000 Karachais were fighting on the fronts of the Great Patriotic War. 9,340 died. 23 Karachais were honored with these titles of heroes of the Soviet Union. 11 soldiers received highest awards.
Our people have experienced so much pain and humiliation. I'm grateful to God that justice has finally triumphed for letting our people return to their homeland. Today there is no war, no fighting, and there aren't any conflicts. At least for that we have to be grateful. I thank God for everything in my prayers. I ask Him for peace for everyone and for the clear skies above our heads, for health and wisdom for our authorities. I ask Him to never allow for a mother to ever have to cry again and to make sure that she can be proud of her son and not be ashamed.
37,703 Balkars were deported from North Caucasus. 562 people died on the way. Out of 95 alls, 70 could not be rebuilt.
With special warmth and respect, I remember the stories from the elders. Ingush were connected to the Karachay. And all those years of losses and exile brought the nations closer.
Годы лишений, до всяких невзгод сблизили эти народы.
According to different assessments, up to 500,000 Chechens and Ingush were deported. During the process of resettlement and during the first years after it, around 100,000 Chechens died, as well as 23,000 Ingush people. It means that almost every fourth citizen from both nations died throughout this period.
Эти вот трудные годы все-таки показало, что хотя
These difficult years show that even though our nations are small, they are still noble people.
Они люди, можно их назвать с большой буквы. У них были честь, достоинство,
people of honor, dignity, respect, and compassion.
Сострадание и всячески старались помочь страждущему таким же.
People who tried their best to help others, who were suffering and been deprived of everything. People were united by one thing: Stalin's unfair policy towards minorities.
Та несправедливая политика, которую проводил Иосиф Сталин в отношении этих наших малых народностей, как один из старейшин Чечен и Ингушетии.
As the elderly of Chechen and Ingushetia, as the chairman of the Alam Council of North Caucasian Federal District, I address everyone. You must respect, cherish each other, and do not let go of the bond you have with your neighbors. After all, the Caucasus is our home, which we must love and protect.
С соседями, ведь Кавказ наш один дом. Кавказ – отчий дом, о котором мы должны и дорожить, и которого мы должны беречь.
On March 8, 1944, Chairman of the Presidium of Supreme Council of the USSR, Mikhail Kalinin, signed an executive order to award security officers and military servicemen for the exemplary fulfillment of special tasks given by the government, i.e., for operations involving taking several minorities away from their homes in the North Caucasus. In total, 714 people were awarded. On April 4, 1962, the order was cancelled. Security officers and military servicemen were stripped of their titles.
Köke termini beskenarratla Caşil çepkelli tabiat Ata curtumu seyir haparı Saulay dünya gaytılar Ata curtumu seyir haparı Saulay dünya gaytılar Atam anam da sense Karaçay Kiriş tutuşup dağların Günüm da sense Karaçay Erip ketkince buzların Darman matallı aryoğavana Şorga sulağa tavlağa Sügen kızım aytır sözleri Сайлап береме сауғаға Сүйген қызым айтыр сөзлені Сайлап береме сауғаға
Боз bulutlar Kaçkı jelге бойсуна Барадыла кыбла таба шымалдан Чырмалаула меңе тауну бойнуна Көп мычымай карайдыла башына Чырмалала меңе тауну бойлуна Көп мычымай карайдыла башына Булутлаган тирелмезге күреше Деу садакны учу кибик тизилип Birbirinden хабар биле сөйлеше Kalmasın dey onsuzuraq üzülüp Birbirinden xabar bile söyleşe Kalmasın dey onsuzuraq üzülüp Siz uçasız kıblata var turnalar Savqalete kanat kağa kıçıra Bir-birde küy soqqan kibik zurnalar Çıgararlar seyirmida makamlar Bir-birde küy soqqan kibik zurnalar Çıgararlar seyirmida makamlar Kim biledi endi sizning en çağız Qaytmay qalır жазбла берге таулага Siz qaytırga таулада да ненче biz Kete bara suqlanırla saulaga